The argument against electric vehicles is often made with charts of lithium mines, battery factories, and carbon-heavy supply chains. These critiques are not wrong. The production of an EV is indeed more carbon-intensive than that of a petrol car. But this narrow frame misses the most vital point. What matters is not only how much pollution is produced, but where it is produced. The local versus the distant. An internal combustion engine ICE car is not merely a mode of transport, it is a mobile factory of poisons. Each journey releases a cocktail of nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, volatile hydrocarbons, and fine particulates into the very air that surrounds us. Unlike carbon dioxide, which diffuses invisibly into the global atmosphere, these pollutants stay close to the ground, in the very streets where we live, breathe, and raise children. In a city like London, with nearly 10 million residents, the arithmetic is stark. A car for each person means 10 million engines firing every day, 10 million tailpipes exhaling toxins into narrow streets and crowded pavements, 10 million invisible streams of poison converging into a shared atmosphere. The result is not just smog on the skyline, but sickness in the body, asthma attacks in children, reduced lung capacity in teenagers, heart disease in adults, premature death for thousands every year. This is where EVs alter the equation. They have no tailpipes, no daily exhalation of urban poisons. They shift the burden of pollution away from the lungs of bystanders and into more distant, centralized sites, the battery factory, the power plant. These may still pollute, but they do not poison the air of every street corner. The air in the city itself, the air that most directly shapes public health, becomes cleaner. This relocation is not trivial. It is the difference between diffuse harm and concentrated responsibility. It is easier to regulate a few smokestacks than to police 10 million exhaust pipes. Containment versus diffusion. When governments first mandated catalytic converters, the logic was simple, but the execution was sprawling. Millions of diffuse emitters, each with its own exhaust pipe, had to be upgraded one by one. Compliance took years, enforcement was patchy, and the public health benefits arrived on a delay. It worked, but only after a long, expensive campaign across a scattered battlefield. Electric vehicles flipped that script. Instead of asking every driver to maintain a miniature chemistry lab under their boot, we moved the problem upstream to a handful of nodes: battery plants, refineries turned power stations, and grid operators. Fewer sources, bigger levers, clearer accountability. Regulators can inspect, upgrade, and decarbonize these nodes far faster than they can police millions of tailpipes. This is the strategic advantage of containment over diffusion. A city breathing the exhaust of 10 million engines is a city with 10 million points of failure. A city charging EVs from a decarbonizing grid is a city with a small number of levers that can be pulled hard: cleaner generation, smarter demand management, and stricter industrial standards. Crucially, progress compounds. Each percentage point of grid cleanliness improves every EV at once. Each upgrade to a factory's recycling loop lowers the footprint of every battery rolling off the line. Policy, engineering, and investment cascade through centralized infrastructure in a way that simply isn't possible with a million distributed engines. The air we share. The global carbon ledger is crucial, but it is not the whole story. What we breathe day by day is not an abstract climate statistic. It is the immediate, lived environment of our lungs. Nitrogen dioxide and fine particulates do not wait to be tallied in climate models. They seep directly into bodies, triggering asthma, stunting lung development, worsening heart disease, and silently shortening lives. Urban air pollution is among the leading causes of preventable death worldwide. In cities choked with traffic, its toll is measured not just in emergency room visits, but in lost productivity, childhoods shaped by inhalers, and communities living with a constant background ache of fatigue and illness. It is the invisible tax of combustion, the quiet price of convenience paid in breath. If every vehicle in London were replaced with an EV today, we would feel the difference within a week. The change would be immediate, almost shocking. Cleaner skies, quieter streets, and a sudden drop in the toxic haze that lingers at ground level. The ripple effects would extend far beyond the air itself. Fewer asthma attacks would mean children missing fewer school days, sharper concentration in classrooms, and healthier development of lungs and brains during their most formative years. Adults, too, would see reduced hospital visits, lower risk of heart disease, and simply more energy in their daily lives. We have already glimpsed this possibility. During the COVID-19 lockdowns, when traffic in London and other major cities nearly vanished overnight, air quality improved dramatically. Levels of nitrogen dioxide fell by up to 40% in some areas, and the difference was visible in the clarity of the sky and measurable in hospital data. For a brief moment, the city breathed differently, and so did its people. EVs offer a way to make that moment permanent, not as an accident of crisis, but as a deliberate act of design. This is where EVs make their most tangible contribution. They may not erase the upstream emissions of mining or manufacturing overnight, but they immediately remove a major source of local toxicity. Streets once filled with exhaust become quieter, cleaner, less hostile to lungs and hearts. For residents, the shift is not theoretical, it is palpable in the air they breathe. In this sense, EVs are less about climate symbolism than about human health. They represent a direct, daily improvement to quality of life in the very places where people live, work, and gather. Cleaner streets are not a distant promise. They are a present reality when the tailpipes disappear. A transitional technology. Electric vehicles are not a perfect solution. They carry the weight of carbon-heavy supply chains, resource-intensive mining, and energy grids that are still far from clean. But history reminds us that progress rarely arrives in pure form. Just as catalytic converters were once a stopgap, a pragmatic leap that bought us cleaner air while better technologies were still emerging, EVs should be understood as a bridge, not an endpoint. What makes them powerful is their capacity to improve over time. Every advancement in renewable energy immediately improves the emissions profile of every EV plugged into the grid. Every innovation in battery recycling lowers the lifetime footprint of vehicles already on the road. Unlike the ICE engine, which has largely exhausted its efficiency gains, EVs are tied to infrastructure and technologies that are still evolving rapidly. This dynamic turns EVs into a platform for transition. They begin imperfect, but they grow cleaner as the systems around them improve. They embody a strategy of cumulative gains, a pathway where each policy, each innovation, and each investment compounds across millions of vehicles at once. To dismiss EVs for their imperfections is to miss their deeper logic. They are not meant to solve the climate crisis in a single leap. They are meant to localize harm, concentrate responsibility, and create a foundation that can be steadily improved. The alternative is to remain chained to a technology, combustion, that has already given us its best and left us with poisoned air. Conclusion: from pipes to possibility. When catalytic converters were introduced, they were not celebrated as flawless. They were a compromise, a clumsy device bolted onto millions of cars in an attempt to make combustion less toxic. Yet they worked, not because they solved the whole problem, but because they reduced harm and bought us time. They were a bridge to a cleaner future that had not yet fully arrived. EVs stand in that same lineage of imperfect but vital transitions. They will not, by themselves, heal the climate. Their supply chains still wound landscapes, their factories still burn fossil fuels, their batteries still demand better recycling. And yet, on the streets where we live, they change everything. They silence the tailpipe, they clear the smog, they give cities back their air. The real question then is not whether EVs are perfectly green. It is whether we can afford to wait for perfection while 10 million exhaust pipes keep exhaling poison into our lungs. To clean 100 smokestacks is hard. To tame 10 million tailpipes is impossible. The choice before us is one of pragmatism, not purity. Let us remember, progress comes not as a single leap, but as a series of thresholds. Catalytic converters were one threshold. EVs are another. Each step matters. Each step buys us breath, time, and possibility. And in that space of possibility, we can build what comes next.